a war, well, that would certainly apply, although no one's talking about a war, but you are talking about much heightened tensions of one kind or another. The question is whether or not there really is some kind of a window of opportunity here. One, in fact, had a very schizophrenic view of this. On the one hand, he's saying, the door is opening and North Korea has said the right things and all that. But then he also said, and it comes across even more strongly in the Japanese version, that, this could be very fleeting. It could be gone with the blink of an eye. And I do think that reflects a kind of a realism and fatalism that China may have about this. Where we are at present, of course, is we are engaged in deliberations about North Korea. We're not engaged in negotiations with North Korea. Reasons are pretty self-evident. It is my own view, increasingly, that I think that one of the critical mistakes that Kim Jong-il made over the past year is he took President Obama's campaign rhetoric much too seriously. And he may have assumed that, given that in 2006, the first nuclear test elicited bilateral negotiations between the United States and North Korea, he might be able to repeat it. In any event, one is arguing, although again I can't emphasize strongly enough, the language from Kim Jong-il that we now have on the record. When Dai Wall went to North Korea, there were references to what Kim supposedly said, but that's from Chinese sources. There was nothing that Kim himself was identified with. So Kim, in his farewell meeting with Wen Jiabao, had about 4 points that he sought to make. They're elliptical, they're a bit cryptic, they're very conditional. You didn't really get a sense of a lot of enthusiasm for it, to say the least. And again, mindful of the parameters that North Korea often sets about these things, they can be remarkably elastic. I mean, we all are familiar with the idea of so-called hostile policy or hostile relations. That can mean almost anything you want it to mean, but the prevailing definition, at least as posed by the North Koreans, and it was very much in evidence when I visited Pyongyang in February of this year. I was there with Steve Bosworth and a few others, and you could almost see a prefiguring of this shift in the language, because the fundamental point, I believe, or the judgment that was made, is North Korea was trying to recalibrate the negotiating playing field, the insistence that it now had to be treated as a state in possession of nuclear weapons, and that therefore the agreements signed in Beijing, the six-party talks, were now in essence at their low. And that, of course, is not addressed in whatever Kim said the other day to Wen Jiabao. Whether they discussed this privately or not, we don't really know. I believe one is well aware that beyond the whole question of just simply diplomatic contact, exchanges, and it's my own instincts or whatever that, Steve Bosworth will pay a visit. I can't say the decision. I mean, clearly the decision has not been redone on that. But the administration has been very clear about what this is and what it is not. The set of expectations are two or threefold. Number one, an expectation that North Korea will recommit to the goals and statements that it made in the context of the six-party talks. That's the whole thing. The administration has also specified, well, they haven't specified, they've stated that there must be irreversible evidence of movement toward denuclearization. And I'm not aware of any clarification of that. That would be worth looking into. Other kinds of statements that clearly indicate that the administration is not of a mind to simply go back to business as usual, but to see this moment in time as one that requires a very, very different approach. Okay, a few comments on commenting on China. Some thoughts on what we did see transpire in Pyongyang. Wen Jiabao came bearing some gifts, I suppose, and with reference to their fidelity to the 1874 stipulations. But it seems to me that a high-level visit of this sort should have been anticipated. Indeed, I think that the Chinese were telling back to various visitors to Beijing privately, just understand that there would have to be something of this magnitude for the occasion. China, therefore, continues to occupy a position that is distinctive from every other major power without quite figuring out what they do with that. No one else enjoys the kind of access that they have, although it may be that the Chinese are the only major power that's interested in trouble with Pyongyang these days. Tom Pickering made a very, very clever point on a trip that I was on with him. It's the kind of thing I wish I had thought of, but I didn't. He was talking about the whole idea of carrots and sticks. We all use this metaphor. And he pointed out the essential incongruity that if you look at it in a China-U.S. angle, China wants the United States to put up more carrots. The United States wants China to put up more sticks. Now, unless you believe, and he said it much more elegantly than I just did, unless you believe there's some sort of a high-low mix here that is to be coordinated, I'm not aware of whether the Chinese government briefed the United States extensively on what the plans were for the visit. But it's clear that the Chinese are still trying to hold out some means by which they think they might elicit some kind of response from North Korea, and by implication, hold the nuclear issue constant. Is that an outcome that would be deemed acceptable by the United States? The U.S. has worked very, very hard in conjunction with all the other parties to collaborate, communicate, be, if you will, on a common script. Indeed, Kirk Campbell even said overnight from Beijing that he says he just sees a level of collaboration and communication that is quite extraordinary and unprecedented. So, are we therefore somehow being drawn back into same old, if you will? Or is there something that is emerging that might be workable? Questions here obviously pertain to American decision-making. Does the United States buy in to what China seems to be proposing? There is a coalition of states that seem to be speaking more or less with common voice that includes China. Clearly, the United States wants to try to find a means by which there is no breakout from that coalition, no, if you will, defections from that coalition. If North Korea's current restart is largely tactical, and that there is not demonstrable evidence of the kind that the United States insists upon, of the sort that I mentioned before, return to the agreements of 05 and 07, signs of an irreversible denuclearization process, and of course, North Korea foregoing its claims to status as a nuclear weapons possessing state. If we don't see that, where might we head? The administration is very, very clear. They are not revisiting sanctions, certainly not at this point, and I think for good reason. These do not seem to be circumstances, barring some kind of a significant shift, that I would expect a meaningful or lengthy re-engagement process unless there is some kind of palpable movement of a sort that we will know when we see it. It won't be so obscure. It doesn't have to be cryptic. It doesn't have to be, in terms that seem all that elaborated. So this returns us to the essence. Do we try to cope with a nuclear-armed North Korea in some kind of obviously want to inhibit what it can do, or if not, what will the alternatives be, and is there a means by which China, the United States, and others can find a way to not control that path? I think that's where we are, and I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Jonathan, thanks very much. It's a great start for this continuing conversation. But let me now turn to John Park. John, we'll tell them quick here. We have to start.
sanctions.